He just wanted a jacket, something warm for the approaching winter, but the staff scoffed at his appearance and told him to leave. The discount clothing store had a policy about dealing with what they called undesirable customers, and the elderly man with worn clothes and tired eyes seemed to fit their definition perfectly. The manager made it clear that his business wasn't welcome, while other customers watched uncomfortably as he was escorted toward the exit. But as he stepped outside into the cold afternoon air, a young man in military dress uniform stopped him mid-stride. The Marine captain had been shopping for his own family when he witnessed the humiliating treatment of the elderly man whose dignity remained intact despite the public embarrassment he had just endured. Something about the man's bearing, his quiet acceptance of injustice, and the way he carried himself despite his worn appearance triggered recognition in the officer's trained eye. This wasn't just any homeless person or troublemaker. This was someone who had served, someone who deserved respect regardless of his current circumstances. Without hesitation, the captain stepped inside the store and confronted the manager, demanding an explanation for the treatment he had just witnessed. His uniform commanded immediate attention, and his authoritative presence transformed the atmosphere as employees realized they were dealing with someone who wouldn't tolerate discrimination or disrespect. When the captain returned moments later with the store owner in tow, the veteran wasn't just offered an apology, he was given the jacket he had wanted along with the respect he had always deserved. But this wasn't just about a jacket or a shopping transaction. This was about recognizing that service and sacrifice don't expire when the uniform comes off, and that those who have given everything for their country deserve dignity and respect regardless of their current circumstances. The captain understood that defending his fellow veteran was as important as any mission he had ever undertaken, because some battles are fought not on foreign soil, but in the everyday interactions that define how we treat those who have served. Welcome to Silent Salute. Before we continue this powerful story, tell us in the comments from which city in the world are you watching this video today? And if you think stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button to support the channel. We're growing every day, and I sincerely thank you for being a part of it. The Veterans Day weekend sales drew crowds to shopping centers across the nation, where retailers offered discounts and promotions designed to attract customers preparing for the holiday season. Among the busiest commercial districts was the Riverside Shopping Plaza in downtown Phoenix, where dozens of stores competed for consumer attention with elaborate window displays and aggressive marketing campaigns that promised significant savings on everything from clothing to electronics. Within this bustling commercial environment, the budget clothing outlet served customers looking for affordable apparel and accessories without the premium prices charged by department stores and specialty retailers. The store attracted a diverse clientele, including students, families on tight budgets, and workers seeking practical clothing for demanding jobs that required durable garments at reasonable prices. On this particular Saturday afternoon, the store was experiencing heavy traffic as shoppers took advantage of Veterans Day weekend promotions that offered additional discounts on already reduced merchandise. The combination of holiday sales and weekend shopping created a crowded, chaotic environment where employees struggled to maintain order while processing customers and restocking merchandise that disappeared from shelves as quickly as it could be replaced. Among the customers browsing through the store's winter clothing section was a man named Ernest Martinez, who had been searching for a warm jacket to help him through the approaching winter months. At 64 years old, Ernest appeared weathered and worn with clothing that showed signs of hard use and limited resources, but his movements were careful and respectful as he examined merchandise without disturbing displays or creating problems for other shoppers. Ernest had been living in transitional housing for the past 18 months after losing his apartment due to medical expenses that had consumed his limited savings and overwhelmed his fixed income. His situation wasn't uncommon among older veterans who faced challenges transitioning from military service to civilian employment while dealing with health issues and economic circumstances that made stable housing difficult to maintain. What wasn't obvious to casual observers was that Ernest's current circumstances didn't reflect his distinguished military service during the Vietnam War, where he had served 2 tours as an infantry soldier with the 1st Cavalry Division. His combat record included participation in major operations throughout Southeast Asia, where he had demonstrated courage and leadership that had earned him recognition from his commanders and the respect of his fellow soldiers. Ernest's post-military life had included decades of steady employment as a construction worker and maintenance technician, but a series of health problems related to his military service had eventually forced him into early retirement, with disability benefits that provided basic support but left little margin for unexpected expenses or economic emergencies. Despite his current financial difficulties, Ernest maintained the personal standards and dignity that had characterized his military service, never asking for charity or special treatment, while working within his limited means to meet his basic needs. His approach to his circumstances reflected the self-reliance and personal responsibility that military service had instilled in him decades earlier. On this shopping trip, Ernest had carefully saved money over several weeks to purchase a winter jacket that would provide adequate warmth during the cold months ahead. He had researched prices at various stores and had chosen the budget clothing outlet because their advertised Veterans Day discounts would allow him to afford a quality garment that would last through multiple seasons. Ernest's shopping methodology was methodical and thorough as he examined jackets for construction quality, warmth ratings, and durability, while comparing prices to ensure he was making the best possible use of his limited resources. His careful approach reflected both financial necessity and the attention to detail that military service had taught him to apply to every decision and purchase. As Ernest continued his search for an appropriate jacket, he attracted the attention of several store employees who had been observing his prolonged examination of merchandise without making immediate purchases. Their observations were influenced by assumptions about his appearance and economic status that led them to conclude he was either unable to afford their merchandise or was potentially planning to steal items he couldn't purchase legitimately. The employees' concerns were communicated to the store manager, Jennifer Walsh, who had developed policies for dealing with customers she considered problematic or potentially threatening to store security and profitability. Walsh's approach to customer relations was heavily influenced by stereotypes and assumptions about appearance and economic status that often resulted in discriminatory treatment of customers who didn't meet her expectations. When Walsh approached Ernest to inquire about his shopping intentions, her tone and manner were confrontational and suspicious rather than helpful or customer-focused. She demanded to know whether he intended to make purchases while implying that his continued presence in the store was unwelcome and potentially problematic for other customers and employees. Ernest responded to Walsh's questions with quiet dignity, explaining that he was shopping for a winter jacket and had money to pay for his purchase, but needed time to compare options and ensure he was making the best decision within his budget. His polite explanation and respectful demeanor should have reassured any reasonable manager, but Walsh's prejudices prevented her from recognizing his legitimacy as a customer. Instead of apologizing for her assumptions, Walsh escalated the situation by demanding that Ernest leave the store immediately, claiming that his presence was disturbing other customers and that the store had the right to refuse service to anyone they considered undesirable. Her public confrontation with Ernest attracted attention from other shoppers who watched uncomfortably as the situation developed. Ernest's response to this humiliating treatment reflected the dignity and self-control that military service had taught him to maintain even under stress and provocation. He didn't argue or create a scene, but quietly accepted the discriminatory treatment while preparing to leave the store despite the injustice of the situation and his legitimate need for the merchandise he had been planning to purchase. As Ernest walked toward the store exit, several other customers expressed disapproval of Walsh's handling of the situation, but none felt confident enough to challenge her authority or advocate directly for Ernest's rights as a potential customer. The atmosphere in the store became tense and uncomfortable as shoppers recognized they had witnessed discrimination but were uncertain about how to respond effectively. Outside the store, Ernest paused on the sidewalk to collect himself and consider his options for finding winter clothing at other retailers that might treat him with more respect and dignity. His disappointment was obvious, but he maintained the composure and self-respect that had sustained him through military service and subsequent civilian challenges. At that moment, Captain Michael Rodriguez was exiting a nearby electronics store where he had been shopping for his family during a brief leave from his duties at the Marine Corps base 20 miles outside the city. Rodriguez was wearing his dress blue uniform because he had attended a Veterans Day ceremony earlier that morning and hadn't had time to change into civilian clothing. Rodriguez immediately recognized the signs of distress and injustice in Ernest's situation, having developed sensitivity to discrimination and mistreatment through his own military experience and leadership training. The captain's instincts told him that the elderly man leaving the clothing store had been treated unfairly and that intervention might be necessary to address whatever injustice had occurred. Without hesitation, Rodriguez approached Ernest and inquired about what had happened inside the store, understanding that military personnel had responsibilities to protect and assist fellow veterans and civilians who faced discrimination or mistreatment. Ernest's explanation of the situation confirmed Rodriguez's suspicions and triggered his determination to address the injustice directly. Rodriguez's military training had prepared him for situations that required decisive action to protect others and uphold principles of justice and dignity that were fundamental to military values. He understood that confronting discrimination was as important as any other aspect of military service, and that his uniform carried responsibilities that extended beyond formal military duties. The captain entered the budget clothing outlet with the authoritative presence and confident bearing that military leadership training had developed through years of command experience. His dress uniform immediately commanded attention and respect from employees and customers who recognized that they were dealing with someone accustomed to authority and unwilling to tolerate injustice or discrimination. Rodriguez approached the store manager and demanded an immediate explanation for the treatment that Ernest had received, while making it clear that he considered the situation unacceptable and requiring immediate correction. His tone was professional but firm, reflecting the kind of command presence that left no doubt about his expectations for appropriate response and remedial action. Walsh found herself in an extremely uncomfortable position as she realized that her discriminatory treatment of Ernest had been witnessed by a military officer who was clearly prepared to challenge her actions and demand accountability. Her attempts to justify her behavior were met with Rodriguez's systematic dismantling of every excuse and rationalization she offered. The captain explained that Ernest was a Vietnam veteran who deserved respect and dignity regardless of his current economic circumstances, and that discriminatory treatment of veterans was not only morally wrong, but potentially illegal under various consumer protection and civil rights statutes. Rodriguez's knowledge of military service and veteran issues gave his arguments weight and credibility that Walsh couldn't dismiss or ignore. Other customers in the store began gathering to observe the confrontation, understanding that they were witnessing something significant and potentially transformative. Several expressed support for Rodriguez's intervention, while others shared their own observations about Walsh's treatment of Ernest and their disapproval of her discriminatory policies and attitudes. Rodriguez demanded that Walsh personally apologize to Ernest and provide him with the jacket he had been seeking, along with appropriate discounts and respectful treatment that should have been provided initially. The captain made it clear that he would not leave until the situation was resolved satisfactorily, and that he was prepared to escalate the matter to corporate management and appropriate authorities if necessary. Faced with the prospect of significant negative publicity and potential legal consequences, Walsh agreed to Rodriguez's demands while attempting to minimize her responsibility for the discriminatory treatment. Her grudging compliance was witnessed by numerous customers who recognized that justice was being served, but only because of the captain's intervention and advocacy. Rodriguez personally escorted Ernest back into the store and supervised his selection of a high-quality winter jacket, while ensuring that he received respectful treatment from employees who had been hostile and dismissive just minutes earlier. The captain's presence transformed the entire atmosphere of the transaction, making it clear that discrimination would not be tolerated. During the shopping process, Rodriguez learned more about Ernest's military service and current circumstances, developing respect and admiration for the veteran's dignity and resilience in facing economic challenges, while maintaining his personal standards and self-respect. The captain recognized Ernest as a fellow warrior who deserved support and recognition rather than discrimination and mistreatment. When Ernest's purchase was completed, Rodriguez insisted on paying for the jacket himself, explaining that one veteran supporting another was both an honor and a responsibility that reflected the bonds formed through military service. Ernest initially resisted this generosity, but eventually accepted it with gratitude and dignity that reflected his understanding of military brotherhood and mutual support. The interaction between Rodriguez and Ernest attracted additional attention from store customers and employees who began to understand that they had witnessed something significant about military values service and the responsibilities that veterans had to support each other regardless of their current circumstances or career achievements. Rodriguez used the opportunity to educate everyone present about the contributions that veterans had made to national security and the respect they deserved regardless of their current economic or social status. His impromptu speech about military service and veteran issues created a teaching moment that influenced everyone who heard it. The captain also made it clear that he would be monitoring the store's treatment of veterans and other customers in the future, and that discriminatory practices would result in consequences, including negative publicity, corporate complaints, and potential legal action. His warning was delivered with the kind of authority that left no doubt about his seriousness and commitment. Following the resolution of the immediate situation, Rodriguez and Ernest spent time together discussing their military experiences and the challenges that veterans face transitioning to civilian life. Their conversation revealed common ground and mutual respect that transcended differences in age, rank, and current circumstances. Rodriguez provided Ernest with contact information for veteran support services and organizations that could assist with housing, employment, and other challenges that many veterans faced in civilian life. The captain's knowledge of available resources and his willingness to provide ongoing support demonstrated the kind of leadership and mentorship that characterized effective military officers. The story of Rodriguez's intervention on Ernest's behalf spread quickly through social media and local news outlets as customers who had witnessed the incident shared their accounts of discrimination being confronted and justice being served through military leadership and advocacy. The publicity generated by their story brought attention to issues of veteran homelessness and the discrimination that many older veterans faced in civilian communities. Corporate management for the budget clothing outlet chain responded to the negative publicity by implementing new policies for customer relations and employee training, while removing Walsh from her management position due to her discriminatory practices and poor judgment. The corporate response demonstrated that public accountability could produce positive changes in business practices and employee behavior. Ernest's situation improved significantly as a result of the publicity surrounding his experience, with media attention leading to offers of employment, housing assistance, and support from veteran organizations and community groups that had been unaware of his circumstances. His story became an example of how individual advocacy could create broader positive change for veteran communities. Rodriguez continued maintaining contact with Ernest, providing mentorship and support that helped the older veteran access resources and opportunities that improved his living situation and overall quality of life. Their ongoing relationship demonstrated the lasting bonds that could develop between military personnel across generational and rank differences. The incident at the budget clothing outlet became a teaching case used by military leadership schools and veteran organizations to illustrate the importance of advocacy and mutual support within military communities. Rodriguez's intervention was recognized as an example of the leadership and moral courage that military service was designed to develop and maintain. Ernest's dignity and grace throughout the discriminatory treatment and subsequent resolution of his situation earned him respect and admiration from the broader community that learned about his story through media coverage and social sharing. His example demonstrated the character and resilience that military service could develop even under challenging civilian circumstances. The broader impact of the incident extended beyond the immediate participants as it raised awareness about veteran homelessness, discrimination against older Americans, and the responsibilities that communities had to support those who had served in military capacities. The story generated discussions about social justice, economic inequality, and the treatment of vulnerable populations. Rodriguez's actions were recognized by his military superiors as reflecting the highest standards of military leadership and commitment to service that extended beyond formal duties to include advocacy for fellow veterans and civilians who faced injustice. His example became part of leadership training that emphasized the ongoing responsibilities of military personnel. Sometimes justice requires someone with the courage and authority to challenge discrimination and demand accountability for unfair treatment. Captain Michael Rodriguez understood that defending Ernest Martinez was as important as any military mission because protecting those who had served was a fundamental responsibility of military leadership and brotherhood. The lesson learned from this incident was about the power of individual advocacy to create positive change while demonstrating that military values of honor, courage, and commitment extended far beyond formal military service to include ongoing responsibilities for supporting fellow veterans and confronting injustice wherever it occurred. In the end, Ernest Martinez didn't need charity or pity because his military service had given him dignity and strength that couldn't be diminished by temporary economic circumstances. But he deserved respect and fair treatment that Rodriguez ensured he received while creating an example of military brotherhood that inspired others to support veterans in their communities. This story was brought to you by Silent Salute. Before we leave you today, here's our question. Have you ever known someone who never asked for recognition but deserved more than anyone else? Tell us in the comments what they meant to you and how you remember them. And if you think stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button to support the channel. We'll see you in the next one.